Namaskar. Something that anybody can challenge? No. That's how it looks like right now. There are some people challenging the H1B ban or the entry fee on that because Congress says that you can only collect the expenses for managing the application, but something else, $100,000 is not the expense for processing one H1B application. That's what the legals will talk about. I'm not a lawyer, but this is one plausible argument. Who's going to fight for the H1Bs? I don't know. Maybe Kalavai does. Let's listen to him. Kalavai ji, namaskar and welcome to P Guru's channel. How are you?
Namaskar, I'm doing fine, Shri Iyer. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, sir. There are lots of options here. We all got H1 at some point of time, and then we moved on, became green card holders, then became citizens. And I see that this is one of what could be many moves directly aimed at Indian Americans, perhaps even Hindu Americans. Your thoughts?
Definitely. So let's look at the big picture, right? Of so right now, uh, I think it was either yesterday or today. Jeffrey Sachs, the economist, gave an interview in which he called the current Trump administration entirely incompetent, right? Because a lot of the behavior is completely unpredictable, and there is no strategic thinking going into any of that. But let's look at some data points. I think grounding ourselves on data is the best way to look at the problem. Uh, starting with the general perception is Indians are stealing American jobs through H1 visa, right? But just look at the much bigger picture. So, about 87% of the H1 visas go to American tech companies, the largest of them being Amazon, right? Starts with Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Netflix, Apple, you name it, all of these American companies, they grab 87% of the H1 visas. Then the other 13% goes to large Indian companies like all this Infosys, TCS, and all of them. And once again, they are serving the same American corporations and the same American economy. So at the end of the day, uh, 87% of the H1s are taken by American corporations like Google, Microsoft, etc. And why are they going for H1 visas, right? That's the very first question one must ask. Uh, Technology changes very fast. So every few months, a new product comes, a new technology arrives, a new chipset arrives. So the technology changes so rapidly, and Indians have done an outstanding job over the last 30, 35 years of building up all of this capability from ground up. And that's the reason companies are going over to India and recruiting them. And another big advantage Indians have is their comfort with the language, with English language. They pick up the language and then they can lead, they can drive the enterprise. So these are the reasons. So now, when Trump, and let's go back to the same number, of all the H1Bs, roughly two-thirds are recruited from India. Okay. So these are the people who have graduated from Indian engineering.
71%. Let's be even more precise. 71%.
71%. All right. Okay. So when you look at it, that's like roughly a little bit over two-thirds of the entire H1 quota is recruited from India. That's companies like Microsoft and others. They hire from India people who have already been trained and who have put in a couple of years, 3, 4 years, whatever it is, of work experience. So those are the people who then migrate to the US and become part of the American workforce. So what do they bring to the table? They bring to the table domain expertise, tech expertise, and even more importantly, a few years of experience before they are even given the H1 visa. So it's not a charity. It's actually a good bargain for America to bring them in. That's number one. Then what about the other two-thirds? So these are the people who are recruited on the shores of the US and given H1 visa. That means battling a bit of cough, so apologies for that. So that means these are the people who have come to the US to earn their master's or PhD, and then they apply for H1 visa, or they have come to the US and they have gained some work experience, either as part of OPT or anything, and then they are applying for H1 visa. Once again, that shows in terms of the overall knowledge curve, they are pretty high up. And that's the reason they are being brought in. And without this workforce coming in, America won't be able to be competitive America cannot innovate. And at this point, I should address one more misconception, usually propped up by the extreme Christian right wing of the United States, where they portray H1B as low cost, low pay employees. In some cases, that could be true, but for most of the cases, it is not, because when 87% of the H1s go to American corporations like Google and Microsoft, obviously they do not have any policy of discriminating based on your visa status or based on your ethnicity or any of those things. And in fact, they cannot do any of that. And if they did, they would be all sued. Okay. So all of these people, they come on a very competitive wage for the most part. Uh, that is the 87%. I cannot comment on the other 13%. Maybe there is a possibility that they are cutting wage, but that's such a small subset of the overall H1B. That's only about 12, 13%. So even if you assume that half of those people are coming in for lower wages, that's something like 5, 6% of the total H1 quota that maybe, I'm just saying it's a possibility. I'm not saying that's really happening. So they are coming in. And the rest of it, about 95% of the H1Bs are obviously working for competitive salaries. They are not stealing American jobs. And instead, on top of being competitive, they also bring in a lot of expertise and experience. So just look at it from every single perspective. This is actually quite an idiotic move on the part of Trump. Now, let's fast forward a little bit. Of all the H1Bs, or of all the candidates who are granted the H1 visa, only about 20 to 25% eventually get the green card. And most of the green card holders, I would assume, end up becoming citizens eventually. But only about 20 25% of the H1 end up receiving green card for multiple reasons. One, the green card process, I think nowadays takes about 10 or 15 years, especially for Indians, Hmm. because there are country specific quotas, and that's why it takes much longer for India. It's a very populous nation. And then, uh, so only when 20% of them are getting green card, what does it mean to the US economy? All of these H1B holders, even though they are not going to live for the long term in the United States, let's say they live for about 6 years and they go back to India, they are paying taxes. So just your social security, payroll taxes, etc., will come to what, about 8 or 10% very easily every month. And this is only at the federal level, and there'll be state taxes. Okay, they pay a lot of taxes, the benefits of which they will never collect. They won't get social security, they won't get Medicare. Instead, they are contributing to the US economy. And that's a massive contribution. That's supporting the American people. And in fact, a lot of the uh, low income clusters of the United States who need all this free Medicare, etc., they are actually supported by this H1B contribution. Because these H1B holders who do not end up getting green card, that's about 75 to 80% of the H1B, they actually contribute to the American exchequer, and that's funding America. This is one. Then look at the other investments that typical Indian H1B is making. Uh, they will invest heavily in their children's education. And I'm not just talking about school, but I'm also talking about all the co-curricular activities and other things. They invest heavily. All of that directly fuels the American economy. And Indians save, Indians invest, and then they buy home, and then they pay all the property tax and other things. Eventually, they may just sell their homes and go back. But while they are here, they invest in all these things apart from uh, buying automobiles and all of these things. So all of this is actually fueling American economy. And it's not that Indians and the H1B holders are coming here to steal the American jobs. On the contrary, as I pointed out, 75 to 80% of them make huge contributions, pay payroll taxes. Like I said, they educate their children, spend money, invest in American schools, American colleges, and then they don't take any of the benefits and they go back. And in some of the cases, the H1B holders come to this country and then they give birth to children. And the children are US citizens because they are natural born in this country. But the parents may go back and then they take the children with them. And then they say, when my child turns 18 or whatever it is, and then at the time I'll send him back or send her back to the US for doing college. So what does it mean? So these parents go back to India They work for 10 or 15 years there, save up all the money, and then they invest it in American universities. Okay. So once again, this is not a liability for America. This is actually an asset. This is a net positive for America that H1B holders, even those who go back to the to India or to China or wherever it is they came from, their children are going to bring lifetime savings and invest it in these savings were mostly earned in other countries like India, but they'll be invested in American universities. That runs into tens of billions of dollars every year. So when you put all these things together, being hostile towards H1 visa holders is one of the stupidest things, one of the least tactical things, one of the most insular, xenophobic things one could have indulged in. So this is just the context setting, and we can talk a lot more on this subject. But I think this is very suicidal. But then I'll pause for a minute here if you have any questions, and then we'll go into the impact of this. Right? What does it mean to Indians, and what will be the impact? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? And how do we cope up with it? We can talk about all that. But do you have any questions?
Thank you so much. And while you take a sip, one of the things that I've been doing is to bring all facets of expressions and views on this H1B program. And I have been very steadfast because I've seen it with my own eyes that H1B has been used quite a bit, especially like you said in the Max 7 companies. And I had a different theory, Kalavai, and that is
Mhm.
that there is one parameter that a lot of people look at before investing in a stock, which is the revenue per employee. For the revenue part, they take all the income that a company gets, but when they compute the employees, they don't add all those who are consultants, namely H1Bs. And guess what? A company like Google probably has a 50-50 split. 50 people, 50%
Right.
employees, 50% consultants. So when you divide the bottom by half, the quotient goes up by 2. So what happens is the revenue per employee of Google is like $1.6 million per employee. Unimaginable, right? And a brick and mortar company like Procter and Gamble is at 776,000 per employee. So what happens? It induces a skew in the stock market. Now, some of you may say, oh, this is not the only factor they are looking at before they decide to invest in the stock. Then those of you who say that, explain this to me. Do you know that the entire frothy Dow Jones Industrial Average and the market today is because of the Max 7 stocks? Look at the growth of these stocks over the last 4 or 5 years. Only now we are saying that money is coming from Europe because Europe is headed for a war. But what happened after COVID? Money has been coming into these stocks only. What is the fault of P&G, Procter and Gamble? It's a perfectly usable company. It has steady staple of products that we all use day in and day out across the world. I mean, why I'm asking all these questions is it is skewed towards one particular group, and yet neither Satya Nadella of Microsoft, who's part of Max 7, nor Sundar Pichai of Alphabet, who's also Max 7, had said a word. How do we
Well,
deal with
well,
this? I
well,
mean,
well. On that, we don't know what kind of parlays are happening behind the scene, right? So, uh, so Uh, so sometimes, like, even Operation Sindhu, right? Trump was on social media taking credit for everything, sorting the war between the Gazans and then the Israelis, India and Pakistan, Ukraine and Russia, and even marital fights between couples, whatever it is, right? He said, I have been sorting out everything. But Modi did not respond to any of those things in public, but showed in action and made the case in a powerful way. So I think, given the volatility of Trump and some of his, acolytes, uh, I think many of these CEOs may not be taking a public stance, but then behind the scenes they'll be working because it's going to impact them, right? Uh, like, for example, I think I'm getting different inputs depending on whom I talk to. So my understanding at this stage is there is an additional $100,000 fee every year per H1 application. Okay, that's my understanding. However, a friend of mine told after talking to the lawyer of his company that uh, For every renewal, it is $100,000. Okay, so regardless, it's a significant amount. Okay, so and it's going to impact all of these companies. Just adding $100,000 per H1 is not an easy thing. I think doctors have been exempted, so these companies will be impacted. But what will be the impact and uh, on Indians, and which way it can unfold, right? So we saw that 65 or 70% of those H1 visas, they go to uh, big tech companies like Google, Microsoft, AWS, and all these Amazon and others. And that means they need these individuals to carry out their work. Okay. And then if Trump makes it exorbitant for them to bring these individuals on H1 visa, then what they will do is they'll shift the entire product group, the entire development team, the technology centers, everything to India, because they still need those people to build these systems. That means what will happen is, instead of generating any revenue at all for the US, the entire groups will get disbanded, and then they'll move to India and then generate employment there. Okay, so that's going to be one possible outcome. And then, uh, in terms of impact, right? I think to be absolutely candid, at least in the short term, this is going to have a serious and negative impact. Okay, so because of the simple reason that until 25, 30 years ago, when we all migrated to the US, you'd have seen that most people who came here to study, they would have come here, they would have done their undergrad in India, and then they'll come to the US for masters, and then they'll come on scholarship. They were not investing their own money, right? So, and then they'll do their masters or PhD, then they'll get hired, then they will get sponsorship, visa sponsorship, then they will settle down in the US. So they were purely brought in for only one reason, that they were intelligent and they had excellent academic credentials, and the United States were willing to invest in them. The universities invested, the corporations invested, and America invested. Whereas in the last particularly 10 or 15 years, we have seen a lot of Indians who come to the US for everything, right? They come for undergrad education, uh, grad school, they come for anything, and then they don't even show up at, uh, uh, they do not necessarily come to the best universities of the US. They go to tier two, tier three, tier four universities. They pay a ton of money. And sometimes like it will be like $250,000 for earning a degree, and that's like close to a couple of crore rupees to 2.2 crore rupees. That's the kind of money the parents are investing in their children. And the entire equation from being attracting the cream of the talent has turned into, all right, we'll get a lot of those talented folks, okay, but in addition, since we can generate money, the universities started bringing in a lot of these students who wouldn't otherwise have been qualified or deserving of being given an invitation. Okay, so I think that is going to impact a lot of people, because they invested all this money in the hope of staying back in the US, getting H1, and eventually becoming American citizens. And many of them will be impacted because they won't get their H1B, and that means they have to go back to India and then they have to work. So it's going to be an impact, pretty serious impact for those people. And second one, right, what has happened is there is a complete breach of trust. So something like H1B requires years of planning. So between two governments, so US has to come up with a policy that's credible, that everyone trusts this is going to be a reliable policy and this will last for a long time, because companies don't decide overnight, look, I'm going to shift 2,000 jobs to India, I'm going to shift 10,000 jobs to India, or I am going to bring 500 people on H1 visa. A lot of these planning happens months or years in advance. And then the budget is secured, and then they start the application process and they bring everyone in. So with this kind of U-turns that Trump makes every single day, uh, almost insane statements that are coming from him and his officials, his cabinet, and everyone. What it means is eventually the trust that the United States enjoyed will begin to evaporate, and most of the companies will think twice before investing in something like a H1B scheme. They will start looking for alternatives. And you would have seen already China is announcing K visa, and countries like Israel, Germany, Japan are already inviting the Indian professionals, tech professionals to come in. That may be a mitigating factor to some extent in the short run. But for a large number of people who had taken it for granted, that, look, since you are making a ton of money in India, working in IT, financial service, etc., we'll send our kids to the US. You can go to tier 3 university. Who cares? Go and study whatever you want. Eventually, you can figure out a way to get a H1B. I think that door has been closed. It'll be rude awakening for many of those kids. I feel sorry for them because they're youngsters. It's not entirely their fault. In part, it's their fault because they're entitled. And instead of earning a scholarship and coming to the US, they thought that they can be helicoptered into the US campuses by their parents who will pay their fees, a ton of money, life savings of parents. They'll invest in these kids, and then these kids will try to take. Uh, they won't even try to get into the top universities, right? If somebody's saying, "Look, I'm going to Stanford or I'm going to Georgia Tech or something," that's one thing. But many of them will go to tier 3 universities, and then they'll come very entitled, and then they were simply assuming that they are going to get H1 and green card and citizenship one day. And I think that dream has been shattered. Okay. To some extent, I think it is just Sri because while America should be attracting the deserving and truly talented folks on H1 or any visa, uh, America also has a duty to take care of its citizens, right? So you cannot flood the market with a large number of people and then uh, say, look, tell the American kids who are raised in this country, who went to the best universities and spent a lot of money, and who are often carrying a college debt to come and then compete with those who have been helicoptered into this country. Okay. And especially when they may not be necessarily as qualified. Okay. So that is one aspect we should seriously look into and not be in denial of that. But I think the biggest problem is that right after Operation Sindoor, Prime Minister Modi not only emphasized on Make in India, but also an India that will be entirely self reliant. Because that's when India realized that you cannot trust anyone, including the United States. Like Chanakya says in the Arthashastra, all of these political relationships are always based on quid pro quo, and those are transactional by nature. And it's very rare for countries to have a long and trusting relationship. Okay, so which means if India were to become self-reliant, then arises the question: if all of these folks, if a number of them return after doing their masters or undergrad or anything in the US and they return to India because they cannot get H1, and a substantial number of students who are planning to go to the US and do masters and eventually get H1 will now reconsider. They will think, look, if I go there and spend 2 years and even if they get scholarship, they may be still hesitant. But if they don't get scholarship, they'll be twice as hesitant because they would think, on the other hand, Indian economy is booming. India is growing at a much faster rate. It's an innovative economy. Let me stay back and earn a good money here. Okay, and in institutes like IITs, it's happening. Almost 25-30% of students are now joining all these startups and product companies in India. Earlier, it used to be like about 80-90% of them will leave IIT and go to the US for masters and PhD. So I think India has to do one thing even on a faster track basis, okay, which is to drive innovation so that these bright students are not uh, frustrated. Instead, they can graduate out of India, out of an Indian engineering college or a tech school or a business school, and then they can work as part of an Indian startup ecosystem or an overall tech ecosystem. But for that to happen, uh, there's a lot more that needs to be done. Number one, at the level of college. So why is that a lot of students come to the US to study or go to Germany to study? It's because of excellent research facility, uh, good endowments in the universities, good brand reputation, excellent quality faculty members, and an overall ecosystem where the corporations are investing in the universities and hiring the students, etc. And that's the reason most Indians want to go abroad. And if India were to compete, then we have to do these things, but we have to do that on a really fast track basis in a matter of few months. Stand up, bring in the corporations. Some of that we already did, right? So India did this, like IITs were involved in a lot of the defense related startup technology work. And all of that came extremely handy during Operation Sindoor. And I think most of those were accomplished over just the last 3 to 4 years' time. So if you could do all of that and win a war in 3 to 4 years' time, of 3 to 4 years of investment, then you can tackle this H1B problem too, provided we create an ecosystem and at least start creating some enclaves which are more livable. Okay, so that people don't get attracted to the US and contrast it with India, with India, like US is, you know, a clean at the cutting edge and a clean environment, etc. Whereas India is corrupt and India is polluted. These kind of extremes shouldn't exist. At least start creating some enclaves. But even more importantly, cleaning up the cities is going to take decades. But at the bare minimum, make sure that uh, that's only one reason somebody is going to uh, become part of a tech workforce and spend 70, 80 hours a week working or invest in a startup. That's because they want to earn money out of it. And that system should never be compromised. And if they can make all this money in India, probably we can turn this from a negative impact into a positive impact, because the good thing about India is the family system is still very intact. A lot of these kids growing up in Bangalore, they could very well stay with their parents. They have their own room. They can stay with their parents, not spend a dime, but spend 3 to 4 years after engineering college working on startup initiatives, not worry about uh, spending their own money. And that way, with a small investment, India can start getting massive returns and we can turn this around. But in the short term, absolutely, there is going to be an impact. But my uh, request to a lot of the youngsters is, if you get a scholarship and if you come to the US, that's perfectly valid. Okay, that's totally justified. But if you have to spend your parents' money and come over here, think harder, think twice. Uh, it's not a good investment. Back to you, Shreya.
Thank you so much. And we can take a few questions now. Ashish Brahmabhat, thank you so much for becoming YouTube member. Vivek Vision wants to know why Indian IT firms were no visionary in investing in R&D.
I think in some ways we saw the same trend in countries like Taiwan too. So what happens is, I think I was just reading on a different topic yesterday, so I'll take a bit of this detour. Uh, so, uh, so I was reading about a lot of the famines that happened between 1860 and the 1900 in India. 10 of those famines happened. Okay, uh, so Ramesh Chandra, that great academic, a great scholar, he summarized those and then he showed that 15 million Indians were killed in those famines by the British in those 40 years. And Dadabhai Nauroji also examined the entire economics around that. And the way it happened was the British uh, stole the Indian grain and exported that while the Indians were starving. They were led to starve and die. And when you look at those photographs, you'll be shocked. And most Indians are not even aware of those photographs. But if you look up those photographs, you'll be shocked because all of those people were literally dying. You can see their skeletal body, hardly any muscle, hardly any flesh, and they were looking worse than the survivors of the Nazi death camps. But that was just a century ago. And look how far India has come. And contrast this to any other country that was colonized, no other country really made a comeback after they were colonized and after they were brutalized. Whereas India started from there, and then in no time, India grew. And then, yes, India suffered from socialism under Congress rule for several years. But to give credit where it is due, Nehru was a disaster when it came to economy, when it came to defense, and when it came to overall development. But in some areas, he was quite visionary, in setting up the IITs and setting up some of the R&D labs, etc. But the problem was he did not complement that by opening up the economy, attracting private investment, and all these things. And as a result of that, the benefits did not accrue, and India was a stagnating economy. But in the last 3 decades, and especially in the last 11 years of Prime Minister Modi's rule, India has opened up so much that now it's the fourth largest economy, very soon going to be the third. And by probably 2050 or 2060, it has the potential to become the largest economy in the world. So, so from that perspective, uh, it's kind of an evolution for a lot of the Indian IT companies. So they started with nothing, right? So most of these companies, they came into existence in the late 90s. They started from nowhere, and then within 30 years, they have become dominant. And then, uh, frankly, a lot of the Americans, especially from the very conservative, right? They feel threatened, uh, and that growth was achieved in 30 years. I think uh, it, they have the capability to uh, make that kind of uh, transformation on steroids in a very short time. But whether they will do it or not is to be seen. But I think it's perfectly doable. And the only reason they have not been doing it so far is they are only focused on the operating margin and serving the American or the Western corporations and earning their profits. And that was a profitable business. But now that avenue is getting narrowed because of tariffs and because of H1B restrictions, etc. So all of these companies and also AI, AI is going to replace a lot of these jobs. So these companies will be now forced to reinvent themselves. The entire economies will have to reinvent themselves, right, based on uh, what AI brings to the table. So I think a lot of them will adapt and a lot of them will start investing in R&D. And frankly, some of that has started to happen in India, especially in defense. CAI has covered a lot of that during defense, during Operation Sindoor. Lot of the private initiative paid rich dividends to us.
Shashikant Reddy wants to know, what about Indian Americans? Your shares in the companies are also dependent on the hard work of H1B Indians and also in your well-being.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is.
I mean,
It is.
I have been using my channel to express a lot of concerns about this, and that is why I talked about those two specific individuals. I want to answer that. You can rebut me or you can add to this, Venkat. How old do you think Kalavai Venkat? Sorry, not Kalavai Venkat. How old do you think Satya Nadella and Sundar Pichai are? In their 50s, 10 years more active as CEOs. They've already reached the pinnacle of their professions because there is nothing beyond running a close to $1 trillion company like Alphabet or Microsoft. But what made you who you are? It's the values you learned growing up. Why can't you just say, okay, I've earned enough fame, fortune in my life. This is something that's close to my heart, and I'm going to take a stand. Because, see, Venkat, I'll tell you, why did Bill Ackman do it? When Harvard had all these clubs supporting October 7th massacre, wasn't Bill Ackman conscious of the fact that this could be problematic for him down the road?
Yeah. So coming back to this, the same question and to add to your point, definitely yes, right? So economies today are very interconnected, and if you take a company like Amazon or Google, uh, the teams. I'm not talking about the entire company. I'm talking about individual teams. The teams will be distributed. They would have an office in the Bay Area, in the Silicon Valley. They'll have something in New York, something in Israel, something in India, something in China, the Philippines, and multiple places. So the economies are interconnected. So the well-being of the one is dependent on the productivity and well-being of the other. Okay, so there is no contradicting that fact. It's absolutely true. And like Sashikant, like I earlier mentioned, contrary to the popular misconception, uh, H1Bs are not low-cost alternatives. They bring exceptional talent. They are the cream of the crop for the most part because 87% of them are hired by big American corporations. Okay. So yeah, even if they're hired in Chennai or Noida or Pune or any other place, so these companies, when Microsoft goes to Indian campuses, they hire the best. When Google goes to Indian campuses, they hire the best. So those are the people who get H1B and they come to the US. So once again, the US is getting the best of the talent. So H1Bs are the very best of the talent pool, comparable to the best in the United States. That's number one. And the number two, like I pointed out, H1B are uh, generating wealth and uh, accelerating American economic growth. Okay, I gave a lot of example. The tax they pay, most of it they don't even get benefits out of because almost 75 to 80% of the H1Bs they go back to India and they don't even stay back to get the green card. But in those 6 or 7 years they lived in the US, they have made significant contributions in the form of tax, investments, and other things, and America benefits from that. So, and third is the most important one, right? So there's a new book which is already released in the US, but I think it's coming in India very soon. It's called Dharma Democracy. It's written by Professor Salvatore Babones. So he's an Australian academic, and it's a brilliant book. But everyone should read that. One aspect he talks about is he illustrates how Indian democracy is very distinct from that of the Western democracies, and that's where he brings up the prefix Dharma democracy because he highlights something that we Hindus know really well. Having studied the Bhagavad Gita and other texts, we know this very well. What is the one thing that the Bhagavad Gita highlights? It highlights Swadharma, right? The duty of the self. So he talks about, whereas Western democracies talk a lot about uh, privileges and rights. Okay, so as if they just uh, manifest in a void and you can demand and get those things. Indian democracy talks about duty. As a citizen, what's your duty? And as a this extends to every realm of life. Okay, as a child, what's your duty? As a parent, as an elder, as a doctor, teacher, etc. What's your duty? So this duty, fulfillment of duty, and then there's another Sanskrit word which is very well known in the Vedas. It's called runa. Okay, so runa means obligation. So we are obligated to leave this planet, this society, in a better shape than what we inherited it in. So this sense of duty pervades Indian society and it drives Indian behavior for the most part. Okay, there are crooks. I'm not discounting any of that, but very large number of Indians do this. The soldiers who are sacrificing their lives and fighting in the bitter terrains, in the extreme terrains, in bitter cold, etc. They're not doing it for money, right? They have the sense of duty. That's why they're doing it. And why is that American corporations are shifting their jobs to India, R&D labs to India? It's not because they're saving money. Okay, that's only one portion of that. Okay, so labor arbitrage is just one portion of that. But the most important part is the sense of ownership that Indians display and get out of that. So that's why uh, this uh, sense of duty that's inherent in the Hindu worldview is what is behind the Indian success story. There is no other country that started from scratch and in less than 30 years became the IT most dominant IT hub of the world. Only India has done it. And it was possible only because of the sense of duty that pervades the Indian thought process, the Hindu thought process. And I think if we capitalize on that, and that's exactly the reason why America and the rest of the world was flocking to India. And it will be America's loss because if they think that they can constrain Indians, okay, by restricting the H1B and other things, what will happen is the entire departments, all the Amazons, Netflix, Apples, Googles of the world, they'll shift those jobs to India and all the research will start to happen in India. And India can grow fast if it can especially invest more in their educational institution and train the students even more rigorously. But this is the, I think, underlying difference. There is a sense of duty that every Indian has. Even the poorest Indian will invest the little bit of savings he or she has into educating her child, hoping that all the sacrifice we make today will bring up the next generation. I think that is the spirit which is going to help and guide India through such controversies. Back to you, Shreya.
Vivek wants to know, does government's acceptance of Zoho make US worried in the long term?
I don't know.
I don't think so because, Zoho might be having some office products that might be able to compete effectively against the foreign products. At the end of the day, you have to see how well these things solve your problem. And I think that's what's going to determine it. So it might be good to have competition. That's what will make Microsoft to produce a better version of Microsoft Word next time around. Next one, please. Ganeshan wants to know, sir, I came to US as a student 4 decades ago, just like Kalavai's example. H1B is widely abused by Indians. Many join day one CPT universities. What is CPT? I don't know.
Or
In
is it
Florida and
OPT?
abuse.
I don't,
Hmm?
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and abuse H1B. This is fraud.
It can certainly happen in some cases. I'm not denying that, and I have myself seen some of those cases. You're absolutely right, but that's where uh, uh, I think I was giving the overall statistic, right? Like 87% of the H1 goes to uh, American companies, big tech companies, and then they do have very rigorous vetting process, and even the remaining 12, 13% goes to very big Indian companies. They have a lot of stake, right? And then they are not using H1 to just ship some bodies to the US, but then they are doing that for sustaining their business. That's their bread and butter. So I would assume a large portion of those are going to be still good, but there would always be a few who will be abusing the system. And I know it happened at least on two occasions in the past. So one was during that Y2K in the late 90s when a lot of people just made it because they claimed they had those mainframe skills. And then during the dot-com boom, anyone who could just spell Java would end up getting a job because most of those, ended up, getting all that bubble burst. But then some people, they made it under those scenarios. But also what happens is uh, a very significant number of folks, uh, if you just look at the US Census data and Pew Research and other things, what you'll find is among the American Indian population, Hindus are only 51%. Okay. Christians are 18 or 20%, a very large number. Okay. And then how is that Christians are uh, on paper only 2% of India's population, almost 20% of the immigrants to the US. Okay. And the reason it happens is twofold. A number of them, they come using the religious visas and other things, and then they seek asylum. That's another route they take. They claim persecution, they seek asylum. This is done in a very systematic manner by the church, by the conservative establishment in the US, or even the left-wing establishment like the Soros NGOs and others. A lot of them, they come here and then they exploit the H1B system. But those are still not going to be very large numbers. And then another avenue is there is one automobile company which has a plant in near Chennai, and its entire IT department is Christian. Okay,
Why
and
don't you name it? Venkat, why are you hesitating on
so
naming it?
uh, because I do not
I
know
know
what
the
the
name.
liability. Yeah, I know the name.
I
Okay, I
know the
know the
name.
name.
I know the name.
But the
Okay,
reason
viewers,
but the reason I'm not
yeah, viewers,
mentioning that
there are
is,
not
yeah,
that many that there are not that many
yeah,
automobile companies operating out of India. So you can guess who it is. Sir, go ahead.
yeah.
Please, sorry about that.
So the entire department is Christian, right? So and all of them, so the subset of those who come to the US would all be Christians. Okay, so that's why you have a large number of them. But also uh, over the last few decades, uh, the Christian churches have worked very systematically on staffing the entire HR departments. The recruitment arms of the companies with Christians. They go to these Christian institutions, study some useless program like MSW, Master of Social Work, some rubbish like that, and then some HR, MBA HR. Okay, who studies MBA HR, right? You go to a business school, you study some real subject like finance, investment banking, and other things, and who studies HR? So, but then these are the people who, um, a large number of them are uh, Christians very closely associated with the church, and then they show up here. And in those areas, there will be some of scam, but still, I'll say when you look at the ratio of that, these scamsters will constitute still a very small percentage. Okay, that should be definitely eliminated. And as I said, uh, even on other fronts, how was the Indian brand equity built? It was built from the 70s, maybe late 60s onwards, 70s, 80s, and 90s. When Indians came, they were bright, they were very well educated, very law abiding, worked very hard. They generated wealth for the American companies. And after observing them for 2, 3 decades, US corporations and the US government realized, and American society realized that we can send our jobs to India. We can start bringing more and more of them on H1 visa, and then uh, they are excellent, reliable partners to us. And then that brand equity takes a long time to build. And the moment we allow even a few rotten apples to get in and then ruin the system uh, while they are not qualified to even get in, then overall our brand is going to get impacted. And that's the reason we should oppose that. But I think the concern is a genuine one, except that I think the ratio of such folks is going to be very few. But even that should be eliminated.
Next one, please. Bangalore Subramaniam Srinivasan wants to know what should H1B visa holders, where do they go from here?
So I think one of the two routes, one of the two could happen, right? So all of this could be just a drama because Trump is a very unpredictable person, right? So he has been making a lot of claims and none of that came true. He wanted to end the war, Russia-Ukraine war, Israel-Gaza war, and every other war you can think of, the Houthi and Saudi war and everything. Nothing happened, right? So and everywhere escalations went up. And in fact, today he announced he's going to send more. He urged uh, Europe to send more weapons to Ukraine, missiles to Ukraine to fight the Russians. So nothing, nothing is working out. And while he has imposed a lot of tariffs, he has been forced to backtrack, walk back most of those. So it is quite possible that he's doing all of these things to um, force India to sign some kind of a trade deal. So he throws, 10 arrows at you, and then one of them sticks. That's what he's hoping, right? So that he can say, look, finally I got India to agree to this. But so he can walk back all of this, and there can be also a lot of pressure coming from uh, the American corporations, because their bottom line is going to be hit very badly. Okay, and somebody is going to do some plain talking to him and say, "Look, if you force me to pay 100," that's what Tim Cook of Apple did, right? When Trump threatened him with tariffs, he said, "All right, go ahead and impose tariff. I'll make the phones in India, and even if I have to pay all this tariff, it will still cost only what $1,250 in the US. Whereas if you manufacture the same phone in the US, it will cost $3,500. Okay, go ahead and do that." And what did Trump do? He said, "All right, I'm backing. Walking back, and I won't impose tariffs on iPhones." So the same would happen here. So I think a lot of CEOs will go back and tell him, look, if you do this, if you have to pay $100,000 every year for every H1B, it's not sustainable. Okay, we cannot do this. And instead, we'll shift the entire departments to India. And if you want to slap tariff on software imports, go ahead and do that. Okay, so that's uh, eventually that may happen, and Trump may have to yield. That's one possibility. But you cannot expect the best outcome, right? And you cannot expect this is what will happen and not have a contingency plan. So what I would tell is, if you're already on H1 in the United States, you are not affected. Okay, so that part is fine. So what you should do is just work towards getting your green card. In fact, during the election campaign, Trump said something that was absolutely reasonable and sane. Okay, so he said, when there are qualified Indian students uh, coming to the US for doing their masters or PhD or anything, we'll give them green card right away after all the vetting process. That would have been brilliant, because that way you there is no uncertainty. You have the criteria. You say, if you meet all these criteria, we'll bring you in. Let's say you go to IIT, you go to BITS Pilani, and all good schools, or IIM Ahmedabad, Bangalore, and then we'll hire you, and then we'll bring you to the US, and we'll give you green card if you as soon as you finish your PhD or masters. Okay, that'll be perfect, because that way they don't have to. There's no uncertainty. They will whether they will get green card or not. But even more importantly, they are not dependent on one company, and even more importantly, they can start working on startups and other things on from day one, and that's good for American economy. So, in fact, Trump was the one who proposed that, and that's why I'm puzzled. After becoming president, instead of taking such revolutionary ideas forward, he regressed, and then he did something absolutely stupid. So, but as far as the Indians are concerned, if you're already on H1B and if you're in the US, you're fine. Okay, and if you don't get your green card, you may have to go back, but that existed even before, right? So because green card takes nowadays like 10 or 15 years, so it takes a long time.
No,
So,
no, no.
but
100
hmm,
years. My dear
100
man,
years?
100 years. 100 years.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it's been a long time since I got mine, so I don't keep track of it. But apart from that, I think the ones who should be most worried about this are the students. So especially if you're spending money to come to the US and study, reconsider that, because after spending all this money, if you're not getting your H1, and if you have to go back to India, how are you going to recover all that investment? So I think those are the ones you should think about. Back to you, sir.
Next one, Peregrine. This is the last question. Some Indians are expecting that Indian Americans should lobby and put pressure on Trump administration to withdraw the H1B visa fee hike. Is this even practical? Peregrine, that's why I have been telling Indian American VCs who have made it big. For them, H1B is their backbone. I don't see them saying anything either. And as
They
far
may
as
not be
Satya
saying, see,
Nadella and one
that's
second,
the,
one second, one
yeah,
second,
sorry,
one second.
sorry.
As far as Satya Nadella and Sundar Pichai are concerned, you can express something as your personal opinion. That will not affect your standing in the corporate world, what you're doing. If anything, people will say, oh, this guy is empathetic. I'm just giving a different point of view. You don't have to agree with me. I'm telling the viewer. Okay, back to you.
No, I think it's a valid point. I think if in a normal society, right, people will speak up, right? Like, if Trump makes an announcement, as serious as to saying, look, I am going to slap $100,000 fee per year on every H1 application. In fact, America is not even going to make that much money out of this, right? So how much is that going to be? Like, if you assume it's
Yeah.
going to be like 100,000 H1 visas in a
75,000
year,
multiplied by 100,000.
that's like what, $7.58 billion a year. That's nothing,
Right.
right? So it's
Right.
not a big amount of money, okay? And whereas the harm it does is tremendous, not only harm to India. In fact, the harm to India is minimal. India can actually capitalize on this, as I explained earlier. But the harm to the United States is phenomenal because US is India is a very young economy, and then it's an innovative economy, and it's on the uh, path of ascendancy. And then if you are going to block all of these people, who's going to invent for America? So just come and look at Silicon Valley, look at any tech firm. 70-80% of your engineers are Indians and Chinese. Okay. And then you don't gain anything by hating them. They are here not because you have done a favor to them. Okay. But because it's a symbiotic relationship. They bring exceptional talent. They are some of the very best. Okay. And then they're generating wealth for you. And likewise, they are coming to America because America is a welcoming society. It's a meritocratic society and people can work hard and earn the rewards. But this strikes the very bottom of that. But in a sane society, in a reasonable society, when an announcement like this is made, people would react, right? The CEOs will immediately speak up, like, somebody said it's a stupid idea. And like I pointed out, they'll immediately ask the question, if uh, 87%, sorry, if 65% of the uh, H1s are recruited from India, then how long will it take for the corporations to shift all those jobs to India itself instead of bringing anyone on H1B? And how is America going to gain from that? Let's say, to explain what this means, in San Francisco, let's say in downtown San Francisco, in Market Street, you have an entire floor of, let's say, 1,000 people working on a tech product, and then they are on H1B, and then the tech firm decides, let me shift all of these jobs to Bangalore tomorrow. Then that floor will be vacated. So what does it mean to the city of San Francisco? No more tax uh, from from those employees. Okay, and then the businesses surrounding that, restaurants, cafeterias, everything, Uber, Lyft, all of them, they go out of business. So America is going to be the loser in this process. But the reason most people are not speaking up today very openly is, um, there is retribution for everything you say, right? It started under the woke leftist administration, but it is continuing. It has become the norm in the US. But I'm sure behind the scene, they will be talking because it's not something to be taken lightly, right? So it's a very critical decision for them. They are going to ask the question, are you going to take it back, or should we shift the jobs to India? Okay, that question is going to come up at some point. And Share, if you recall, when SB 403, that fake caste discrimination thing that was introduced in California, it went through the Senate, right? Both the Republicans and the Democrats voted for that. That was aimed at Hindus. Okay, it was brought in by all this Ambedkarites, this EVRA gangs and others, and then they in coalition with the Christian Church. At the time, also the CEOs did not speak, but when it went to the governor, he vetoed it. So why do you think he vetoed it? Okay, my guess is the CEOs worked with him behind the scenes and said, look, there is no discrimination, and this is the Christian church, Dravidians and Dalitas and other parasitic elements who are doing this. So don't destroy the economy. Okay, somewhere he would have listened and he would have backed off. That's why he vetoed the bill. I think something like that will happen. They'll try to persuade Trump behind the scenes and, uh, make him see the reality. That's my hope. Let's wait and
Thank
watch.
you so much. Viewers, I encourage all of you to send in your comments using our app. It fixes the grammar and also it vets you for us, because sometimes we don't know if it is a spam or if it is somebody deliberately creating mischief. We would like to downplay the questions coming from the chat, and we would prefer you move to our app. The app is available for both Android and iPhone phones, so please use that to send in your questions, and that would help us know that these are genuine questions and not some mischievous questions. Thank you so much, Venkat. I'm seeing this a lot these days. Somewhere somebody's, what I call phonus bolonus is burning. Thank you so much again. and we'll see you soon. Namaskar.
Thank you. Namaste.